Off the ball. This is News Talk.
Now, you're very welcome back. So we mentioned there in the news round that Premier League and Championship clubs will be able to offer licensed standing areas from January 1st as part of a pilot programme. Very happy to say Tony Evans joins us from the London Independent, amongst other places. Hi, Tony.
Hi, how's things?
Yeah, very well. So this has been coming for some time, really. I know there was a trial before COVID. Research was carried out. There were various mechanisms trialled. Rail seating in particular was the trial at Celtic Park and Borussia Dortmund as well, and Shrewsbury Town and Wickham and Oxford. They trialled these railings. Effectively, seats are folded away. There's a railing in front, a railing behind, and that all seemed to go very well. And it's probably there's been a campaign certainly for many a year now to bring this back into English football.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the things, the biggest cause of resistance really was this idea that standing had caused the deaths of Hillsborough, which is so far from the truth, it's untrue. And almost, it was an emotional response by a lot of people, and many of them in Liverpool, and many of them, the families of those who died, the 97 who died, who basically said, we don't want to stand them back at any price. But it became clear that rail seating and safe standing were much more safe in a football ground than standing in seats. I mean, we've all seen it when someone scores and in sort of packed seats, people go tumbling down. Essentially, you've got a 2-foot tripwire in front of you. And this made it dangerous because people will always stand at football matches. And what we needed to do was to get them to stand in the safest possible way. And I think this has finally come to fruition. And it's, more than 3 decades too late, but at least we've got there.
It has always been very emotive post Hillsborough, and wasn't it the Taylor report which pretty much installed that blanket ban, and that's been in place. So can you give us your sense, and I guess it's probably anecdotal as much as anything, that softening on Merseyside, when you think that started? Because I can imagine post Hillsborough, those immediate years in the 90s, there must have been a very strong sense, as you said, of like absolutely standing never again. That has to, we don't want that to happen. When did you detect that softening in a very significant way, Tony?
Well, not until recently. 10 years ago, I went with a Football Supporters Federation safe standing roadshow to Liverpool and got a relatively hostile reaction. And obviously, I stood up, faced them down and said, I was there. I know what caused it, and stressed that one of the fundamental lies, and until we addressed that fundamental lie that stand and kill people, we weren't going to get the full extent of the culpability for the people who actually did it across to most of the public. And I think in the years since then, I think there's been a realization that safe standings work so well on the continent. These trials have gone slowly, but they've built confidence. And I think increasingly, even those who still have a little bit of a knee-jerk response to the idea of standing, because, it evokes so many painful memories. I think the realization for them has now come to the point that, this is the safest way to keep people from injuring themselves at football matches.
That reluctance is very understandable. One, because of the memories, and secondly, because the direct reaction to Hillsborough was to ban standing. So, that neuro pathway there, it's fairly well burned in.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, part of the whole response to it was to throw the blame, first, the fans, and secondly, it's standing. And what that did is it let those who actually caused it and endangered people, it let them off the hook. I mean, the idea that the Leopard's Lane wouldn't have a safety certificate and would host a semi-final is absolutely insane. And, the bad design obviously put people in trouble, but the calamitous policing actually sort of caused people to die. I think when everyone looks at this, you see it's completely different. Every individual gets their own spec. Every individual is protected by a barrier in front and behind, and it really does create a space, and a safe space, for people who are standing up, watching football games. Unfortunately, those who think it'll lead to cheaper ticket prices are wrong. They'll be exactly the same, and it won't increase attendances either.
So capacity won't increase. Effectively, you'll just be standing where your seat is.
Yeah, you'll be paying to stand up rather than getting a seat you can relax in. So it's but as many people would prefer to stand at football games, I think it's the best way. Unfortunately, I can't see anything making going to games cheaper.
If there have been injuries with the celebrations in Premier League grounds of late, I suspect they've all been fairly minor. But you do see fans, as you said, tumbling down on top of each other and going crazy when there is a big goal. So I guess the railings stop that happening in short.
Yeah, I mean, I was at for the UEFA Cup game at Old Trafford a few years ago, Liverpool playing there. And every time Liverpool crossed the halfway line, I braced myself in case they scored, because you could feel, obviously in a big game like that, with a lot of emotions running high. And sure enough, when Coutinho scored just before half time, I ducked down rather than jump up. And some guy came flying over the top of us. He was older than me. And he ended up at half time lying with his head facing down the steps between two blocks of seats. And the ambulance man had to come and deal with him. And, when you get situations like that, that's not good. It's not good. And the best thing you can do is let people celebrate in a way that they're not going to hurt themselves and others.
Yes. So in a sense, like, it's an acknowledgement of the reality here. I mean, this isn't about encouraging a better atmosphere necessarily. Your point seems to be the scene you've just described is what's happening, so let's deal with it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think anyone who cares about football fans and anyone who's campaigned on behalf of football fans would say safety is the primary reason. Now, if it improves atmosphere, all well and good. And, we know from almost every other walk of life, when people sing, they stand up. It's the best way to do it. So, and they do anyway at football matches. So that'll be a side effect. It probably will improve the atmosphere. But the main thing is people, and you know what? It might be the majority of people only have cuts and bruises on the shins and things like that. And it may be, but, they can at least go home without that sort of thing.
What percentage of, say, Premier League stadiums do you envisage having standing areas?
Well, in the short term, there'll probably be 5 or 6 that will do it, because you've got to have it in both ends. For example, Liverpool haven't got it at both ends at the moment, and obviously Liverpool will probably be one of the last to do it. But for example, Manchester United, Chelsea, Tottenham, undoubtedly going to do it. So I think we'll see. We'll see, as I say, 5 or 6, a quarter of them doing it. But within the next 2 or 3 years, the entire Premier League and the entire Championship will probably have standing sections.
And Tony, how big do you think those standing sections will be in percentage terms of a ground's capacity?
Well, initially they'll be small, but I think they'll move to about 20, 30%. By the time we've finished it. I mean, remember, probably most people who go to football matches, and given the average age seems to be climbing and the prices seem to be excluding young people, most people who want to go to football matches are like me and want to sit down. They've got bad knees. They stuck for too long in the youth. And, they need a little bit of relaxation at times. So, that's the thing. The other thing is no one's going to be forcing standing on Premier League fans or Championship fans when they go to the ground. No, people, some of the opponents have acted like that, as if, we're going to be made to stand. No, you're not. What's going to be for? It's going to be for the young people behind goals, most likely, the people who go on the away end, places where there is persistent standing anyway, and which makes stewarding difficult, it makes policing difficult. And so, I can't see it ever getting higher than about 30%.
Yeah, we tend to agree. Because, I mean, already, I don't know what the debate is like over in the UK. I'd be kind of interested, I guess that's my question. But you can already imagine the lines of argument and, well, look at Euro 2020 in the final there, and if we give football fans an inch, they'll take a mile, and it's going to be unruly and disorganised and it will get out of hand. Those arguments, I suspect, are there. I don't know how vociferous they are.
Well, yeah, they are there, and it does happen. I mean, and there are occasions at big games, I think many of us have been to them, where clearly there are more people in the area, the seating area, than actually allotted seats. People have got into the ground, and like the final at Wembley this year. But the one thing that each individual space for rail seating allows you to know whose ticket is there, the same way as in seats. allows you to know his ticket and trace him back. And presumably, for me, the big problem with events like Wembley is not as much the configuration of the stadium, and it's the way football is policed. Football is still policed really badly. Some of the lessons from Hillsborough have not been learned yet. And the thing is, it's because they've never been truly addressed, and no one's ever taken responsibility, and no one ever will. And until we actually address the issues of the way you police football grounds, then what we'll have incidents like Wembley occasionally, and whether you've got safe standing or whether you've got seats, these things will happen.
Yeah, well, I guess ultimately, if you're letting too many fans into a ground, whether they're standing or sitting, I mean, that's beside the point. Your initial problem is the obvious one. I guess, look, a lot of people listening over here wouldn't necessarily be going to games all that often, if at all. What lessons have not been learned from Hillsborough when you talk about policing there around games in 2021?
Well, you even look at this season. A lot of the teams in the Premier League, including Liverpool, have introduced computerized turnstiles where you can get in, you can use your phone in. That's the positive thing. You go, oh, this is great. Just got my phone and my ticket. Actually, there's massive queues being outside stadiums. Manchester City in the EFL Cup last night, there was massive queues outside before kickoff. People were not getting in time, and you're getting the old line thrown back at us as well. Oh, it's not a case of the system working. It's a case of people getting there late. Well, people have bought tickets. They should be allowed to get there as long as it's before the kickoff. At any time, the place should be set up to get them in. And that's just in terms of individual clubs doing this. In terms of policing stadiums, we saw at Wembley, the police don't set up the cordons at a good distance. They don't break up potentially rowdy incidents quickly enough. They let things slide. Yeah, there's, you look at Wembley, and that was almost, in many ways, although I think the parallels with Hillsborough are unfortunate, but outside the ground, it was a similar situation. What they didn't do was set up cordons to funnel people through, to make sure that you own the tickets, to slow down the crush outside the ground, which in Hillsborough's instance led to the deaths and led to a policeman panicking and opening the gates. But Wembley, it allowed people who didn't have tickets to get in positions where they could charge the gates. And we consistently see this happening. And it's almost like nobody sat down and learned from it. And again, as I said before, and that's probably because no one's taken responsibility, because responsibility leads to people acting differently in the future.
Tony Evans from the London Independent. Always great to have you on, Tony. Thanks so much.
Always a pleasure.
Off the ball on News Talk.